Hi, my name is Adriana. I'm going to walk you through a Schoology sample math course setup that you can consider for your own distance learning needs. So you'll notice here that this is Geometry A, so this would be the equivalent of the first semester. And you'll notice that there are several folders that are here in the materials page, and each folder corresponds to a learning target. So for some teachers, learning targets are very familiar. For those of us who are mastery learning and grading certified, uh, some teachers might understand this more as units. So each folder can correspond to a separate unit. And here you'll notice that these are marked must complete, and they're marked must complete sequentially. So a student would work through and demonstrate proficiency in this learning target, and then they would be granted access to the next one. And this would all be done in sequence. You don't necessarily have to set up your own Schoology course this way. It definitely does not need to be sequential, but it's easier for students to follow when it's set up this way. Um, but this is just, I think, an easy to follow setup for most learners of any age. The way that you mark these must completes so that they're done in sequence is you would go to the options tab, and then you would go to student completion. And then here you would indicate which folders students must complete, and if you'd like for that to happen sequentially. You'll notice that these are not marked that way because I may decide, well, first of all, right now there's nothing in them, but I could decide that I want to be doing something where students would be navigating inside of both of these folders for different resources. So I may not want to mark them as complete. Later on, I may choose to do that, but that's something for you to consider. You'll notice that here, learning target number 1, geometric constructions, this is in alignment with our current district curricular map, which means that the goal here would be for students to be able to perform geometric constructions involving copying and bisecting segments and angles. But again, this could be whatever your learning goal initially might be. And then within this folder, you'll notice that there are more folders, and they're color coded the same way so that students know, okay, I'm working on this color, which means that this is where I am. And then once I'm no longer in that color, that means that I advanced to the next new thing. So I think that's helpful. But here you'll notice that I just sequenced it even further. Foundationally, we're starting with segments, and then from there we're moving on to angles, which are then, 2 segments, and then we can move on to like different types of intersecting segments and angles. So within each of those folders, there's more folders, but again, this is just to support students in their understanding that everything has to be done in this sequence by design the way it is here. Again, that does not need to be the case, but I think that for distance learning, it makes sense to have things in the order that you expect students to complete them, just so that it's a little bit more streamlined for them. So here you'll notice that we are in understanding congruent line segments, practicing with construction tools, bisecting segments. These are all also marked must complete, again, by going to options and then going to student completion. So what that means is that a student would be navigating this and nothing would be available for them to work on, or it would be locked until the previous assignment has been completed successfully, or at least at minimum viewed. So If I'm a student, it would be easy for me to just use these next and previous buttons, because by design with these student completion restrictions, then it's not going to let me go to something that I might not be prepared for, because my teacher went ahead and made sure that, you know, the appropriate level of understanding was there. You'll notice that here, a lot of these are must view, because that's all that's needed, either viewed, read, watched. And then some of these are practice, and we'll talk about the different types available. But for now, most of them are just must view. So if I move into one of the first assignments here, you'll notice that this is a page. So then this page here that you can put in your folders, and I'll show you how to do that. You would go to add materials, and then you would select add page. So that's where we were right here, this very first thing. But you know, you can add a page, and then inside of that page, you can really explain whatever you want in writing, and then you can embed images, you can embed videos here, because this is the very first material that a student would be engaging in. I'm giving them a preview of what the content will be. So by practicing with the resources in this folder, you'll develop an understanding of the definition of congruent line segments. And then I write that they'll be able to answer questions like these. So they can take a minute to read the question and look at the figure and kind of reflect, do they understand what that means? Some students are not going to do that. They're going to say, okay, do I have to turn anything in? Do I have to click anything? And that's okay. Everything that they're going to be practicing to help them understand better is coming. So something else that you can do in Schoology is you can add a discussion board. And so what you would do once you're in this folder, again, you go to add materials, and then you go to add discussion, and that's how you can do that. But here, this is being done as like a reflection preview. So even if they weren't paying attention to the previous material on the previous opening introductory page, they can take the time to think about these things. And I have it set so that students must type a response in order to move on. So they have to submit something that they post here. And again, as the teacher, the administrator, the moderator, you'd be able to then read what the student has written, and then you can like it, you can reply to it. This is something that fellow classmates can do as well. And then that's one way to provide some feedback, right, for students based on what they're thinking. If you click on here, you could always, if for whatever reason you don't think that something is suitable or appropriate, you can delete it and then deal with it that way. You could also, if you see something like, you know, potentially inappropriate, or that you don't think is just appropriate for this discussion board, something that you can do in your courses is you can send messages. So you can send messages directly to students, or you could send messages to your entire class, and then you could just say, hey, you know, like this is all members of this course, and then subject, you could write like discussion protocols, or, you know, whatever, like discussion subject. And then you'd be able to type in a message just like reminder, you know, when you're here, please make sure that you're being respectful, you know, or else you're not going to get credit. It's not going to lock you. It's going to lock you out. You're not going to be able to move on. You could also record, and then you can choose to do audio only, or you could choose to do audio and video, and you can do that at any point in time So for like in reference to any assignment or just in general as a quick check-in, those are available to you. You could also, if you wanted to, for example, attach, like, let's say you found a website and they go over discussion board protocols, you know, you could always put the link in there, and then you can title this like, please read, and then students would know that they have to read that as part of the message. So moving on, another thing that you can do in your Schoology course is you can embed or you can link to a Google document. So this is just an example of an assignment that is a Google document from Google Classroom. So if that's something that you use and you'd like to use Schoology as your go-to platform, you could always, you know, in Schoology, link your Google Classroom assignments for students to access. And it's pretty straightforward. Here, I simply linked a document that I already had as part of my Google Drive. And so then I made that an assignment for students to engage in. So returning to that initial folder, right now we'd be in here as a student. So the student has to view the item at minimum, but it is an assignment, so they would submit it. Then they'd move into this next part, which is a video. And you have many different ways that you can make videos accessible to students in Schoology. The way that this video is being seen here is it's embedded in a page. So I'll go back to this folder, and we were here. This was the video, but you'll notice this is a page. So when you go to add materials, you would add a page, and then as part of that page, there is this feature where you can insert content, and you can insert, for example, images and media, and then you would be able to say, if you had the link, then you can select media, and then you could put the link in here, and then the video would automatically appear on this page. So what's nice about that is that you could always include like questions that you want students to think about while they're watching the video, right? And then you can embed the video here, or you can, you know, have some instructions of what they should be doing along with watching the video or what to expect after. And so then it's a really nice way to have it all in the same window. You could also have instructions here and then link it so that this would be something students would click on the page and then the video would appear in a separate window. Sometimes that's very beneficial, but putting the video or access to it on a page with instructions is very supportive. So something that you could also do in isolation of that whole page is you could simply add a link or an external tool. So when students would get to that point, they would be redirected directly to the video, but then there wouldn't be any, you know, teacher or administrator instructions for them. So this is nice to include if you just want to give them access to some resources that, you know, with choice, if they already have instructions, and this is really nice, or in other ways. But personally, I really enjoy having the entire page just so that if needed, you could provide instructions before and after. Other things that you can do is, again, if you're already pretty fluent with Google and you, for example, use like Google quizzes and you already have that set up, then you can still use them in Schoology. You would be putting them, again, I put it in this page so that it's embedded, and then students would be working on this quiz within here, and then submitting it and getting their feedback all within here, so that they're not having to go to other platforms and kind of having to deal or juggle with multiple different resources and locations at once. That can be pretty overwhelming, especially if you're juggling several classes. So this is another page. So after this quiz, these are just steps. So in that particular quiz that you saw, students were going to receive immediate feedback. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? And why? And so then this is just some next steps. If they missed more than 2 items, then they can click here, and here are some instructions for the kind of practice that they're going to need. If they only missed 1 or 2 items on that quiz, then they probably need some practice, but not as much. So then there's some links here for some practice that would be supportive of that need. And then if they didn't miss any items on the quiz, that means that they're right on track. And then they have a couple options that they could do. And it says here that they're optional, so students can choose to engage with these additional things. There's a Flipgrid. So a lot of people are already familiar with Flipgrid. It's pretty much just an additional instructional tool where you would be able to upload, for example, like an image, and then a student would be able to respond with their own video response or image response to that question. So students really enjoy that because they get to use like their devices and they get creative. And then here's a video that they might choose to watch for a little enrichment, and then that same video in Spanish if anyone is interested. Here, after that, there is a link to another quiz, and this particular quiz is a Khan Academy quiz. So that's just another tool available. Khan Academy has several quizzes that follow their sequence of instructional videos. So then those are always fun for students to check their understanding. So then for students who didn't do as well as they'd hoped the first time around, it could be very motivating to have a follow-up opportunity, even though they do have the possibility, like here they can retake, so they can retry the previous quiz to improve that score. So here I inserted a page just as a reminder to make office hours or tutoring or like a check-in, possibly through video conferencing, or even like when you're going to be available to message on Schoology, just to make that announcement to your students. You could also make the announcement like through a message, right? You can send it and tell them when you're going to be available that way, so that they all get, whatever you're planning to do to check in with them. But this is just an example for, if you set a day of the week aside and you decided to have like a window of time where you said, we're going to do like Zoom, or we're going to do a Google Meet or something like that. Then you could give them, dates and times so that they can plan. Right now, it's really difficult to teach to your whole class the way we normally would at school. And so a lot of students just aren't able to do synchronous learning for several different reasons. So it's always nice to let students know ahead of time, hey, this is when the teacher is going to be available, and please have your questions ready, or any assignments that we've been working on, I'll be clarifying and giving you feedback on the spot. Anything like that that you think might be beneficial. Again, this is just a suggestion. This is by no means something that you need to do. But another thing to consider is in planning for meeting with your students virtually is, especially if it's office hours, you might want to gather information ahead of time so that you can plan to meet their specific needs. So this is a Google form, and a lot of people at this point are very familiar with how to create Google Forms, but what's nice is that you can embed it here in a page in Schoology so that your students, they could fill out a Google form and you could ask them questions like, what topics did you practice this week? What do you think you understood? What assignments did you struggle with? You know, what would be your preference to have help? Ask the teacher questions, ask your peers questions. Um, I didn't have enough opportunities to practice and I'd like that. I need more resources. I need to watch more videos, or, you know, give them an opportunity to explain what they think is going to help them or why they're stuck. It could even be technical reasons, right? Like I don't have regular access to my computer, or Schoology is down sometimes, or whatever the case might be. So I need more time. What specific questions might you like to have answered during the conference, right? Having those ahead of time will be really helpful for you as the teacher to be able to really target those needs. Are you interested in attending a breakout room for peer support? Some of the video conferencing resources provide support for the host or you, the teacher, to have these breakout rooms. So then you could group students in different ways, either randomly by your ability level based on the data that you've collected on like quizzes they've taken, or discussion posts and different assignments they've submitted. So sometimes students enjoy and really benefit from working with their peers. And, if you can plan for that, that would be really supportive of your time, because then students who feel like they really need to ask the teacher questions can work directly in a breakout room with you. And you can check in on other breakout rooms. So that's a possibility. Select the item that best describes how you've managed your own learning, giving students an opportunity, to really reflect on what they've been able to do. So like, this is going from not so well to very well. I have mostly used resources like Brainly, Google Images, Mathway, Photomath to find answers to a lot of my work. So they really had to look for support on their own. I don't really understand how to do it myself, so then I have to resort to these other methods, right? So we know that these are all widely available resources that provide students with answers. So having students reflect on that and having them understand that that this is like on the lower level of understanding is important. Because ideally, we want them to be out like on this end. I have used resources a few times to check my work. I've helped my classmates understand the topic they're working on, and I'm absolutely confident that I understand the topic I'm working on. Most students will fall into here if they're making good progress. I've used some resources a few times to check my work. I've checked with some of my classmates, and I can do a lot of this on my own with confidence. Something like, what other questions do you have, so that you can address it. This could you might find that a student has a question that you could very easily respond to by sending them a message, right? And so then that would be really helpful. It could be something like, Schoology has locked me out of the next step. Like, I can't go to the next step. And so then for you, that's a logistical like troubleshooting issue. So you could always go back, and what's really nice is that as a teacher, you can view the course as the student. So you could choose to view the course as the student, and then you could see what they see on their screen, and you might be able to resolve issues that way. So moving on, now we're in this next folder, practicing with construction tools. So we're now in like the next level of understanding. So if as a student I was able to break through all of those previous tasks, then now I'm here. So then I would start with the very first thing. I wouldn't be allowed to go to anything else with the settings the way they are right now. And then again, this is a page, and then this page, a little bit of student voluntary interaction. Which of the following shapes is a circle? Point to the circle. And then, that leads into the formal definition of the circle with a video embedded on this page for students to watch. Then, a little bit of narrative explanation about circle making tool or the compass, with some images that will help them make some connections. And then another video just to show that a compass doesn't have to look like this, right? Here's a video of a teacher who's using his arm and a marker um, as a compass. So he's making these really nice circles on the board. So this is really going to tap into their understanding of a center of a circle and the circumference of the circle, but just exposing them to different ideas, introductory ideas about circles. Again, with images and then videos. There's so many videos on YouTube that are like great, that you can embed, right, to make sure that you're communicating to students what you want them to understand. And then, you're always able to, on a page, again, you're embedding these resources around your own instructions or ideas that you want students to understand. So because this is a geometry class, they'll be exposed to GeoGebra a lot. And so then this is just an image to show them what they'll expect with some instructions. Again, an example of being able to link additional resources. So here, if a student wanted to read about some history, they don't have to. That's not directly related to the learning target, but it's interesting for some students. So, believe it or not, there's going to be several students who are always going to ask really inquisitive things. And so it's just nice to make those resources available to them. So they go to next, and then you'll see that, there's construction practice here. And this will be like the first time for a lot of students they're going to be interacting with the computer heavily, or with their technology heavily. So traditionally in a geometry class, personally, I love using handheld physical construction tools. That's not going to happen here without, teacher guidance. So in order to ensure that we do know how to do the constructions, we're going to do them using these applets. And so then you'll notice that here is an opportunity for students to explore that tool. So by clicking that link, it will take them to like an opportunity to practice low stakes. And then here, they'd be able to engage in some additional practice with the tools. So for this, it's really like using like the equivalent of a geometry calculator, so that they're doing that work with these tools as opposed to paper and pencil. And then here you'll see that there's a solution. So they were able to practice. And then for a lot of students, they need the support. They need to know, okay, am I on the right track? What was I doing? Technically, or typically, traditionally in the classroom, we're able to provide immediate feedback. And that's what really helps a lot of students make progress in their understanding. But because we're not immediately available in person, what is really helpful is to provide students with some information to help guide them. So in this particular case, a student, it's feasible. A student could see this and, feel like, I don't know what to do. This is so different. I've never done anything like this. What is the teacher asking me to do? Well, there's instructions here, but for a lot of people, that's still unclear. So it's really helpful to then see what the expectation is and then try to make a connection like, oh, okay, this is what was on the previous screen. And now I see what's gonna, this is the expectation when it says draw radius AB, oh, I understand. I have to figure out how to make A and B connect, you know, and draw radius AC. I have to figure out how to make A and C connect with this segment. So then I'd be able to then go back and then play with the applet here that's embedded to try to make that happen, right? But at least now I have something that I can compare it to. Could a student just see this and then say, okay, it unlocked it. I didn't try it. Let me keep going. Of course they can. But then at some point they're going to hit a quiz or something else, or you're, you know, asking them a question in a video conference, and then you'll be able to understand to what extent they understand or don't. So then you can, you know, encourage them or offer them some one-on-one support. You know, you could share your screen the way I'm sharing mine now with the student and really walk them through, and they could be trying on their screen. That could be very helpful. So this is another practice opportunity. But again, it's the same applet. So then students would be able to practice with that applet, and then the instructions are on the top. And just like before, this is a reminder of what the task was, and this is a possible solution. Again, could a student have just clicked next, next, next? Yes. Are they really learning? No. Would you still be able to see that they're not really understanding? Yeah. You know, and we'll see that there are other assignments that are here, and then students would have to submit, and then you'd have that feedback. This is another page that's now leading students into constructing segments a different way. So they've been constructing segments as radii of circles. And, you know, it just turns out that, you know, most of the time when we want to draw segments, we don't necessarily want to draw them inside of circles. Like, yeah, we want them all to be the same measure, like the legs of the table, but we don't want to have to keep drawing the circles to make sure that they're the same measure. So then what else can we do to do that? So that's just providing some support, moving into like the next stage of that topic. And then again, it's really important to use like a consistent series of resources, because then students aren't having to relearn how to use the technology. They can focus on just you know, figuring out the task, and most of their energy and effort is going to go towards whatever the task is, as opposed to trying to figure out the technical difficulties that can come with learning new platforms. So that's going to be a given, but the more consistent you are with your resources and your expectations, then, you know, it's going to be more supportive for students to focus on the learning. So here's a solution. And in this case, the solution was a little bit more complicated. So then I recorded the solution for students to watch, and then made sure that students understand that I know they can go back and they can try as many times as they need to finally get it. That's okay. And then, you know, asking a question to deepen their understanding. Technically, again, would a student just keep clicking next? I mean, they could. They're going to eventually hit certain, you know, formative assessment points. And that's going to be one way for you to gauge their level of understanding. So here, you know, this is related to the activity they just did previously. So they have to post. This is a must post. So, you know, once you have several comments here, once several people respond, it's usually like our intuition to read what other people have said and then formulate something in alignment to what they've said. But that's also really helpful to make sure that we understand. So making sure that you're providing a response to your students' comments is always going to be very motivating for students, but it's also going to give you an opportunity to see how well they understand by asking follow-up questions. And every time that someone makes a comment or that you respond to a comment, people receive notifications by default. So then there's no way that a student, like, they would know that you saw it, especially if they've received responses from the teacher previously. They're always hoping, like, oh my god, is my teacher going to respond? So then they'll see it, and they'll be able to say, either honestly, answer your question, and then you feel good that they understand, or they might be honest with you and say, I'm not really sure about that, um, or can we message about it, or something to that effect. So this is just another reminder, and again, this is just here because I feel like with every significant chunk of learning, like, consistent check-ins would be great. And so then just reminding students, or making this a form like this, if you choose to make that part of your practice, something that's available, so that you know how to plan for face-to-face time or how to address questions, that would be really helpful. This is now a quiz, and this is a very open-ended quiz. So I'm going to show you the preview, and this is a quiz that's been built in Schoology. And it's only 3 items, but they're open-ended. So something that you can do when you create a quiz in Schoology is you can have text. So this is not part of the quiz. This is just some information about the quiz that I embedded. And I just let them know that in this particular case, they're going to see that there's a link that they can click to, like, play and use their tools to support a response. But what they're going to be providing are explanations and steps. So then for me as the teacher, that's how I'm going to be able to gauge how well they understand what we've been learning. So, and then another thing for them to consider is that at the end, they're going to see that, they'll have next steps, and they're going to be provided with hints after the quiz. So if they didn't get all 3 of the problems correct, then they can go back and retake them, and then they can watch the hints to understand it better before they do that. So then, this is in preview mode, but this is what the students would see. So then this is a problem, and then they'd be typing their response into here. Something really cool about Schoology is that when you create a quiz in Schoology, you have the ability to decide what type of keyboards students have access to. So this is like your regular keyboard that you'd see like on a tablet or on your computer, but then this is the geometry keyboard. So there are symbols here that students would have access to. So that's really nice. And then here, again, they have another item. They can click here and it will take them to the GeoGebra page that has this on it with all of the tools, so that they can use the measuring tools and the circle making tools if they need them. But then ultimately their response goes in this box, and it's a short answer response. So what matters here is their explanation. So this is not going to be scored within Schoology because I did not put any responses as correct answers, because I'm going to go in whenever a student submits their quiz and read their explanations or their steps. And that's how I'm going to know how well they understand. And then I'll either give them the grade for passing or for not having passed that item. So these are tiered, or they're leveled, so that it goes from like easiest to most demanding cognitively, but you don't have to set it up that way. Schoology lets you like jumble the problems for every student so that they're not in the same order. But again, they have the link so that they could go to the page where they would see this same setup and they could play with the tools, but I'm asking for them to provide a clear explanation about these shapes and the geometry. So they type it into here, and then I would see that response on my end, and then I would decide what the grade is here. And then this is the next steps. So they could either click here or they could click here. It's still going to take them to that same page for the next steps. So that was the puzzle piece. The puzzle piece is when you add an assessment. And this means that you're going to create it within Schoology. So that's that puzzle piece. So then if they submit that, and you'll notice here that it says that they must score at least 3. So they have to get all 3 correct in order for the next step to be available to them. And again, this is just teacher preference. You could set this to at least 2 or at least 1. You know, here, if you have a quiz that's, 5 items and you want to say, well, it's okay if a student got 4 out of 5, they know enough, like they can move on to the next step. You can decide, you set that parameter here in the options in the student completion. So you click it and then you'll see a list of everything that's here, and then you can decide on this one that they need to get like a minimum of whatever score for them to move on. You could also not have that at all. You don't have to have a student completion requirement here. I like it because I'm not going to be checking in on students as frequently one-to-one as I would if I saw them daily or almost daily. So this is just for me. I'm going to get a notification when a student makes a submission, so I'll know immediately to score it. And then I'll also know if they did not score well, that I need to provide them with some feedback and I need to intervene. And, that's important to me at this stage, but based on whatever needs you might have, that might be different. So then here's some additional opportunities for students to engage in, but they're not in any way things that they have to view. I mean, they probably will, and then decide if these things are of their interest or will meet their need. So now we're in the practice. Oh no, let me go back. So then we were here. So now we would be going into this next folder, the bisecting segments. And again, here, there's a discussion opportunity, and then you'll see that there's a video, and this is a video that, again, like here, it's uploaded to YouTube. I recorded it because I felt like this is an intro, and I really wanted my students to understand it the way I want them to understand it. So I was compelled to record this video and have it available for them. But this is, again, like completely, like this is something that if you feel comfortable doing, like recording your own work and uploading it, like if you're there, that's amazing. But just know that there's so many resources available on YouTube that so many teachers have made public. So then this is a quiz, and it may seem like, well, didn't we just start this? The thing is that you could use this as a pre-assessment for this topic. And so then you'd be able to see how students do. And if a student knows enough, then they could move on, because these are some like foundational ideas that a lot of students might remember from previous courses. But then if you notice that someone is kind of, deficient in these ideas, then you can provide that intervention, and then you'd be able to assign things to individual students. So, in your options, you can individually assign things to particular students. And that could be like data driven. So based on, you know, what their performance, you can then decide what instructionally would be best for students. So here you'll notice it says must score at least 4, and it was 4 items. And if a student has those prerequisite skills, those foundational skills, then they can move forward. And I know they're not going to have trouble, but then if they're not there yet, then I can intervene at this point. And then after that, you'll just notice that here, again, keeping it very consistent, we're still in the pink folder, so we're still constructing, so we're still using GeoGebra, and then the students are at this point, like, you know, pretty familiar with this. And then, as always, making the solution available for them so that they feel supported and they understand, like, oh, okay, now I know that that's the expectation. Let me think about why I didn't understand that the first time, and let me go back and keep trying. So you'll notice that here, that consistency of the practice and of how these are referred to as far as labels, that's really important. It'll also really help when students have questions, and if they can tell you what the name of that task was, that's going to be very helpful for you if your conventions with labeling make, you know, logical sense, like if there's that flow. Another thing that you can do that's pretty neat is, again, this is a page in this folder, but then just like you can link your Google Classroom assignments or documents from your Google Drive in Schoology, one of the things that you can do on Google is create a Google site. And so a Google site is literally your own page or series of pages. And so then this is a learning target number 1, geometric constructions Google site. And what's nice is that at this stage, if a student wants to review anything, or if, you know, they are ready for some challenge, like they want to see something new, they can always go back and review things that they've already seen, or they have the opportunity, like, oh, I didn't see that yet, or I'm curious about what that might be. So then you're offering them that choice. Here I offered the collection of quizzes, just so that if a student wanted to retake some quizzes, they can, because why not? These are practice opportunities, and, you know, that can be really helpful. In practice, they have access to additional practice opportunities. So if a student were to message me and say, I think I get it, but I think I also would really benefit from some additional practice. Well, that's great. I might redirect them to this, and I might say, notice that there are levels that I indicated on each of those additional practice opportunities, and these are brand new. Like, these are not in the Schoology course. And you've got an easy one. Why don't you start there and then work your way up, and then the solutions are at the very end, right? So if you need them as you're working through, or if you want to check your work at the end, then that's there. And then if you try it, and then I check back with you, like, let's see how that worked out, and let's see how far you got. So I have an easy, a moderate, and a challenge, so that if a student really wanted or felt like they needed that extra practice, they could engage with these opportunities. And then these going beyond opportunities. So this is an application of algebra into some of the segment work that we've been doing. And so then there's a tutorial video here, and then the worksheet that this tutorial uses, so that they could follow along. And then an additional one with answers, so that the student could engage with this if they feel like they want the challenge. And then going beyond number 2. So this was moderate. There's a tutorial video, and then the exact same set of problems with a new set of problems. But then there's the going beyond number 2. And this one is set at challenge because it's harder. So they would click here and they would go and they'd get to practice something that is related to this, but definitely more difficult. And then here, going beyond number 3, challenge. So this is, again, a new video. This is pretty intense. And then they would be able to click here and they'd be able to take a quiz. So, and that quiz would be scored for them. So that would be something where they would have immediate feedback. So that's always really nice. So this is, again, a general setup for a sample Schoology course that is distance learning friendly. Just to recap, there's a lot of really great features in Schoology. Just organization wise, you kind of want to set it up ideally so that students can navigate this sequentially, and then use your color coding to make sure that students understand why certain things are certain colors. I've seen a lot of teachers do other things that are really great. Like they'll have a section and then they'll have like consistency across everything where like all of their quizzes are in the blue folder. So every time you see a blue folder, you know that a quiz is coming, or, you know, other ways to organize. But as long as the flow is there for students to understand why it's set up the way that it is, that's really helpful. Breaking up your unit or your learning target so that students understand like every step or level of their understanding is really helpful. And then making sure that, you know, once you're inside of a topic, that there's many or at least several opportunities for students to both develop their understanding, to practice, and to get feedback is going to be really important.